all-time starting lineups that they're putting up there. Who's got the better list here, Tim? This is some pretty recent history that we're talking about.
I was going to say, do they know the NBA existed before 1993? I'm going to take VJ's team.
All right.
Yeah, I'm going to take...
They're very similar, actually. Iman's face right now. Well, since we're making some picks, Iman,
I'm just confused if they can have everybody avail. I'm just confused.
You know what? I think we're going to chalk it up to age and recent history. But we thought we'd do a little bit of this, a little bit of that. I'm going to give you two options. You're going to pick one. Simple. Iman, you'll start us off here. Two future Hall of Fame point guards are on the available free agent list. So a different list than those guys we're doing here. Who has more to offer a team right now? Chris Paul, Russell Westbrook?
CP don't hate me. Give me Russell Westbrook. CP, don't kill me. Don't kill me.
Why?
Russell Westbrook is one of the fiercest competitors I've ever gotten to compete against. And when you talk about somebody that will give themselves up and do whatever for the team, I think that he's a little more suited for that position than Chris Paul would be. Chris Paul's pretty much been dominant with the ball the whole time. That's the way you want him to play, and that's the only way I think he can. I don't think he could play as efficient as Russell Westbrook could.
Everyone who has played with Russ raves about him as a teammate, too. Like, a lot of folks say that they have really enjoyed him on their team as opposed to playing against him. What about the Lakers and the Clippers? They both had some really interesting off seasons. ESPN Bet released their win totals. Lakers over under 48.5. The Clippers 47.5. Tim, who do you think is going to win more games?
The Clippers. The Clippers are clearly the best team in L.A. And look, it's not necessarily about star power. Let's talk about the defensive end of the floor. The Lakers have a whole lot of question marks. The Clippers have probably 6 guys on their roster who would be the best defender in that Lakers locker room.
Lakers Clippers this year in Crypto.com Arena could be interesting. All right, incoming Duke freshman, top 3 high school recruit Cameron Boozer. He recently said that Duke is being, quote, overlooked this season. It's not like be here for the rest of my career. I love this community and everything you've given me and my family. There's a lot more work to do. You guys deserve a championship, and I think we're just getting started here. Now, those championship aspirations, they got off to a little bit of a rocky start in 2024. Embiid, he would miss the first 9 games of the season due to injury and a suspension. When Embiid was on the floor to start the season, he did look good, though. 31-point game against the Bulls after missing the previous 7 games, a 27 and 9 rebound performance against the defending champion Boston Celtics. That one was on Christmas Day. However, the Sixers and Joel, they would start to struggle in February after a 7-game losing streak, and then the Sixers made that decision to shut him down for the remainder of the season with a lingering knee trouble here. So for the first time here on NBA Today, I'd like to welcome in Dotun Akintoye, who just released an excellent profile that's up right now on ESPN.com. I really encourage all of our readers to take a second to go and read it when you have an hour this afternoon. But you sat down with Joel Embiid several times throughout this story. What stood out to you the most in those conversations?
Well, thanks for having me first, Malika. I think Joel is an incredibly sensitive, incredibly complicated person. And I think there are some of those traits that are perhaps at odds with the role that he plays, which is a leader of an organization, a superstar. And I think he's been struggling with that ever since he's been cast in that role.
Yeah, I think sensitive was a really good way to put this. And the way that you explore what Joel Embiid has been through in this story was really interesting to me. Something that jumped out in your profile was just the amount of frustration, I think, that Joel has fostered throughout his career, especially with the organization. How did he express that to you? Because there was a couple of specific moments that I think fans may be surprised by the behind the scenes of.
Yeah, I think, we talked about continuity quite a bit, and it means something to him. I mean, in basketball terms, I think he has a sort of theory about roster consistency, what that does. He often talks about the Denver Nuggets and their championship, but I also think it means something to him in a deeper way than that. Trust for him is like a huge, not a concern, perhaps a fixation is maybe the better way to. And, one of the incidents of the last season was the leak in the fall after a closed door meeting that the team had. And he brought it up with me, and it's still bothering him very clearly. I think for him, it's a microcosm of certain fears he has and a certain history he has with the organization about people who maybe don't have his best interest at heart and who he can't rely on. So it's on his mind. It's a huge facet of his personality.
And one of the ways that I read it is he looked to sort of take back some of that control when he felt like that trust was spiraling. He talks about the behind the scenes of an interview he did this season with Lisa Salters. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I think Joel was incredibly frustrated this last season, and he felt like no one was listening to him. And it felt, again, I think, of an echo of an earlier part of his career where he didn't feel listened to and he shut down. And I think not a similar thing happened this year in that, there was a lot of pressure on him to play, and his body didn't feel right. And I think finally, and I think the conversation with Lisa happened in February, he had had enough, and he was going to speak his mind publicly and sort of state his position and then let the team deal with the fallout of that.
And that's when he said to Lisa, I may have to have surgery. The team was caught off guard by that, but that seemed to be, as he put it, his cry for help is the way that he described it to you, to sort of say, no, I need to be listened to here. And now he's describing this as the most important offseason of his career. And I think there may be some fans, just being honest out there, who may say, well, what about the last ones? We've heard this story before, right? Why does this feel different, and how does he plan on sort of wrapping his arms around this?
Well, he's approaching it, I'd say, carefully and aggressively at the same time.
Okay.
I saw him shortly after his surgery, and he was already in rehab. But I think also he's being careful in that he's not going to allow external pressures to force him back to the court before he feels he's ready to come back. And I think there's a big uncertainty. He doesn't know what body he's going to be returning to and what kind of player he's going to be. And it's difficult to ascend to the place that he's been as a player and then be anything else. So I think that's the thing that's on his mind, and that's why it's so important, because the next time we see Joel Embiid on the basketball court, we will be watching, hopefully, I think he believes, the last few years of his prime.
Doesn't know what sort of body he's going to be returning to. I imagine for an NBA superstar, that's an incredibly scary feeling in a lot of ways, still trying to feel like yourself, as you said, in the end of your prime. Through all of these ups and downs, Joel Embiid has been really introspective, and it's rare that he gives someone such an intimate glance, and he did that with you here. What has he learned about himself through this process that now he's ready to share with the world?
I think the last year of his life has been really momentous for him. There's so many things to talk about. I think in a way he's learning that he needs people more, but I think he's also learning to please them less. And that's an interesting place to be. He talked to me about being in therapy and trying to, sort of unpacking the feelings he's been dealing with, I think, over the last year, but also over the length of his career. There's, one of his former coaches said something to me. They said, Joel would have been fine on a deserted island. I think there's something fundamentally lonely in him, and I think he's learning about that too. But that's at odds with the role he has to play, as we said earlier. He has to be a leader, and I think he's learning about that side of himself and trying to explore that. The friendship that he has with Tyrese Maxey is really important. It's a real connection for him, and I think it's made him a better teammate.
Jayden, I really appreciate you taking the time to sort of walk us through the way that Joel Embiid has been thinking and feeling about this entire process. Pun intended, but I really encourage everybody to go and to read your story, because I think, as everyone at home knows right now, there is so much nuance that we can only capture so much of right here on NBA Today. Jayden, I really appreciate the time. Again, his story is up right now on ESPN.com. And when he is right, there is nobody like Joel Embiid in terms of scoring, right? His 30.9 points per game the last 5 seasons, it leads the entire NBA here. As we say hello to our front office insider, Bobby Marks, I want to dive into a lot of parts of this story, Bobby, but let's start here with you, because there's so much to unpack. Do you agree, Bobby, that this is the most important offseason of Joel Embiid's life?
I do, Malika, and I look at this as this partnership between Philadelphia and Joel Embiid. there's no turning back, right? Like, they've got to make this work, certainly from the Embiid health perspective here. And I remember last September when Joel Embiid had 2 years left on his contract, and he wound up signing that 3-year max extension, and that drew a lot of ire across the league. Why would Philadelphia commit another 3 years to a player that certainly is an MVP candidate, but it certainly has been injury related? And here you look at it. There's 4 years, $242 million. Malika, the last year of that contract is $69 million. That is the danger zone of contracts. So for both sides, they've got to make it work here, for better or worse.
Tim, do you feel like there's a real conflict when it comes to the messaging around the 76ers here between what Joel Embiid is saying and what the 76ers say?
Who cares what I think? Joel Embiid clearly feels like there's a conflict, and there have been a lot of issues with the Philadelphia 76ers throughout the course of his career. The constant seems to have been a lack of trust in the organization, and when trust is lost, it's really hard to regain, really hard to rebuild. And, just listen to Joel Embiid. Read his words. He clearly does not feel that his best interests are always being looked out for. I mean, he said in the story, the interview with Lisa Salters was a cry for help.
Yeah, and that I thought was really interesting, because it's one thing to feel as if you aren't being listened to. You know this. You've been in these locker rooms. It's another thing to decide that I've been not listened to for so long that I need to litigate it in an interview. And then it's another thing to feel you need to take another step and do this extensive and incredibly well done profile.